Okay, welcome back to the Are You Strong show. I don't want to even use the word extraordinary. It's probably above extraordinary. I don't know what other word to use for that. But I have a young man who has really accomplished some extraordinary things, some exciting things. He's building a life of abundance while impacting other people's lives through some really cool things. And I was introduced to this young man through a good friend of mine, which we'll talk about in a second. And uh, and he hyped him up so much that I couldn't wait to have this guy on the show. But Joe Rinaldi from originally from Westfield, New Jersey, now in Philadelphia, right?
Correct.
Welcome to the show, Joe.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate all the hype. I hope that our conversation lives up to it. And yeah, I can introduce myself, and it might be a bit different from how people typically introduce themselves. But I would say that my name is Joe Rinaldi. I'm a man of faith. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a friend. I'm a coach and a business owner. But really, beneath all of the titles, I'm just a human being trying to do my best in every single thing that I do. And that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that's a heck of a nutshell, you know. And I know you and I were chatting before, and we were talking about asking you certain types of questions on the show, and I had this whole list of stuff to ask you. And then I took some time and looked at your website and watched your videos. I was like, oh my God, I have to ask this guy so many more questions that really are completely out of the realm of what I was going to ask you. So I'm really jacked up. But I have to put a plug in first because I know he's waiting. But my best friend in life, Joe Dwyer, who Joe, just so you know, he and I went to kindergarten together. I don't know if I told you that. So we've known each other for almost 55 years. It's a long time. And he told me about you, and he's like, you got to get Joe on your show. You got to hear his story. And so him, his wife Donna, and his kids, I think they all might be sitting in the living room listening. You know, so
Well,
that
if
might be
if
pretty cool.
if you guys are listening, it's been a while, but I miss all of you, and hopefully I'll get to see you soon.
Yep. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about Joe. Again, he's a dear friend of mine. I was the best man at his wedding. He was the best man in mine. But when we went to kindergarten, that's how far back we're going to go here, Joe. Is my last name and his last name are close in alphabetical order. I happened to come in first. My mother dropped me off. I was crying out my eyes out, and I sat down after I calmed down. And it's funny how you remember this 55 years ago. And all of a sudden, the door opens up and this kid comes in screaming at the top of his lungs, grabbing onto his mother. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I just remember him coming in. And I'm like, holy smokes. And they're like, well, go sit over here. And he sat right next to me. And we both sat there and cried our eyes out. First day of school, But since then, he and I have been the best of friends. And, it's been a great relationship for 55 years.
Wow. What a great way to meet each other. And it's so I guess impressive that you've continued a friendship for that
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're actually going out to dinner next Tuesday or next Thursday night on the 10th,
Nice.
which will be good. But so let's get into you, right? So you're from Westfield, you're down in Philadelphia. What was the motivational factor to, hey, I'm gonna move down to Philadelphia?
So to make a long story short, and I'm sure we can dive into pieces of this, I grew up playing sports. I love exercise and the human body. That eventually led me down a path to pursue my doctorate degree of physical therapy. And I just so happened to end up at Drexel University down here in Philadelphia. And the reason I stayed is because I met my now wife in physical therapy school. And, wherever she was going to be is where I was going to be. So here we are.
Is she a physical therapist too?
She is. Yeah.
Now, do you guys work together?
Oh, no. We have very different interests within the world of physical therapy and very different work styles. So
Okay.
we are married, but we probably will never work together.
Okay. Sometimes that's a good thing,
Yeah.
right? you know. Oh, before I go any further, I have to ask you, the Rocky Steps. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So this will tip everyone off listening to how insane I am at times. So I participated in an event a few weeks ago at the Rocky Steps here in Philadelphia. And the Rocky Steps are the nickname for the art museum steps. And I always find it funny that the whole city revolves around this fictional character. But the fundraiser and the event was to run up and down those Rocky Steps for 24 hours in a row. And so me and 31 other individuals with a couple screws loose. We all ran up and down those steps for 24 hours and I ended up with 74, just over 74 miles. And it was an incredible experience. We raised a lot of money for a great cause. And I am looking forward to doing it again next year.
Now, so up and down the Rocky Steps, and there's probably a lot of young people who have like, what the heck's the Rocky Steps? Watch the movie Rocky. Um, but did you take any breaks, or was it just up and down for 24 straight hours? How did that work?
In the beginning, it was very continuous. And then after the 4, 5, 6 hour mark, it was a 5 minute break here, a 10 minute break there to change the socks, drink some water, eat some food.
Right.
I don't think I took a break longer than 10 minutes at any point, and so it was fairly continuous.
How did you train for that?
Man, I undertrained for sure. I love lifting, and so I wasn't willing to give up my days in the gym. So I run every single day. I've got a run streak that is at 912 consecutive days
Wow.
today of at least a mile. So I'm always in that kind of shape. But I did a couple sessions on the stairs. My biggest session training was 6 hours on the Rocky Stairs, where I did almost a marathon. And then that was about it. A lot of it was grit and mental.
Now, have you run a marathon before? You must have.
Yeah, I run a couple marathon distances and a couple longer distances as well, but this was by far the furthest I've ever gone with my 2 feet.
Wow, that's incredible.
Thank you.
I don't know how your calves were feeling after that.
They were painful. My wife has a video of me going up our stairs in our row home here in Philadelphia,
Yep.
and it was painful. There was a lot of grunting and moaning.
You're gonna put that on your website,
Yeah, I should.
you know? So you grew up as a from what Joe tells me, a really good athlete. Again, and you have a pretty good reputation of being really good at what you do.
No.
So can you talk about growing up, the sports you were playing? Talk about what inspired you. You said you played, football in college. Talk about that for a bit.
Sure. So grew up in Westfield, New Jersey. I am the oldest of three, so I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And my dad was really the one who got us into sports. My dad played baseball in college at Manhattan College.
Did he
Um,
play
wi-
with Joe?
so I actually need to clarify that. I'm not entirely sure if they overlapped,
What
but
years were your dad? How old's your dad?
so my dad is. I'm going to out him on the podcast. No, he's 55.
No,
No,
because
so
Joe,
must have missed.
yeah, Joe was probably your dad was probably unless Joe. I don't think Joe played 5 years, but your dad was probably 1 year after Joe graduated.
Got it.
I'm gonna
Yes.
guess.
That sounds right. So,
Yeah.
so he played baseball in college. He was the athlete of his family, and so growing up, from as long as I can remember, I was hitting a ball off of the tee or swinging at a wiffle ball in our backyard. And growing up, baseball was a way that I really bonded with my dad, and with my younger brother and with my younger sister. And so spring and summer and fall was baseball. It was, spring ball, it was summer ball, it was fall ball. And that was a big part of my childhood. I grew up a Yankees fan. So I
So,
feel very, very grateful to have grown up in a time where the Yankees were constantly winning World Series. And, Derek Jeter was the guy I looked up to. And I had such a great childhood in that way. I made so many great friends through the sport of baseball. And then when I was a little bit older, maybe 10, 11, 12, I started to play football. I really loved just the raw grit and toughness that football involved. That was a little bit different than baseball. And also played a bit of basketball. And the basketball scene is where I met the Dwyers.
okay.
And so, yeah, I played baseball until I was a teenager. and this gets into a bigger part of my story, so I can keep this brief and we can dive in if you'd like. But
Yeah.
I was born with a genetic eye condition that's called Best disease.
Hmm.
And the reason that's important is because it causes progressive loss of central eyesight. And it started to affect me when I was a teenager. And as a result, I really had trouble seeing the baseball. And so I went from, playing on the highest level travel team to barely being able to catch a ball over the course of a few years. And it was tough for me to give that up, but it felt like the right thing. And football was there to kind of catch my fall. And I kind of gave all I had to the sport of football, played through high school. And then when I went to college at Bucknell University, decided to walk on because I missed being part of a team and pushing myself in that way. And that lasted a year until I made a tackle and lost another chunk of my eyesight and was advised by a few doctors that I should, hang up the cleats.
Stop playing. What position were you?
In high school, I played fullback and outside linebacker, and Bucknell, I was a safety because at that level, those guys are a lot
A little
bigger and a lot.
bigger.
Oh yeah,
Just a
so
little bigger. So Joe, can we talk about the onset of that disease? Um, how did you like? What did you start to see, feel, or how did you notice something was wrong?
sure. So this will get a bit into the science of it all, but when I was 10 years old, I went from having a normal childhood to waking up one morning before school and not being able to see at all out of my right eye. And I remember waking up in the morning and kind of rubbing my eyes, and I just kept opening and closing because I wasn't sure what was happening. And I realized I couldn't see out of my right eye. And I told my parents, they were confused. They brought me into New York City, dropped everything. We saw a bunch of different doctors, and I ended up seeing a specialist who diagnosed me with Best disease. And what had happened was I had abnormal blood vessels that had formed behind my retina. And for whatever reason, we don't know, I don't think we'll ever know, one of those blood vessels ruptured, which led to blood pooling behind my retina, which led to a complete loss of sight. And I'm really grateful that we met the doctors that we met because I had a laser procedure that evening and they stopped the bleeding. My body reabsorbed that blood and I was able to regain some of that sight that I had lost. And fast forward to today at 30 years old, I'm legally blind in my right eye. And so that was the start. It was very abrupt. And it continued to gradually and sporadically worsen throughout the rest of my life to this point.
So as a 10-year-old, I mean, obviously it's hard enough as a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, but as a 10-year-old, how did you handle that as a young boy?
Not well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing that sticks out to me through, I'd say, my 10 to 15-year-old time window is just the thought of not wanting to be different. I remember going to school and my parents would
Mhm.
encourage me, sit in the front of class, ask for more time on your tests, take advantage of the help that you can get because school all of a sudden became a lot more challenging for me. And I remember telling my parents, yep, okay, I'll sit in the front of the class. And then I would go to school and I would sit in the back. Kids would ask me where I was. And instead of telling them I was at the doctor, I would tell them I was sick. And I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be normal. And, I think in a lot of ways, it stopped me from taking risks and pursuing opportunities and putting myself out there because I was so afraid that if I tried and failed something, I would fall back on the excuse in my mind that my sight was bad, and I didn't want to make excuses. I didn't want to try things and fail things, and so I kind of just retracted into the shell to protect myself and to be as quote unquote normal as possible in those years.
Right. Now, how long did it take until you felt good enough, let's say, to not feel that way?
I think it was when I started playing high school football because at that point, I had a good group of friends around me. I had built a lot of confidence, in the weight room and just through fitness in general. And I had also hit this stretch where my sight was relatively stable for a few years. And so I started to forget about what was going on with my eyes. Of course, I was reminded of it everywhere I looked, but I was more focused on, football and school and friends. And so I'd say, that 16, 17 year old range was when I started to feel a bit more comfortable living with the condition.
Now, and all your friends were aware of it?
Yeah, my friends were aware of it, mostly because when I played football, I wore a protective visor. And it always killed me because, as a freshman, I'm out on the practice field in summer practices, and, the seniors are on the same field as us. And I looked up to them. And I remember kids making comments like, oh, this kid thinks he's cool. He's got a visor on. And, that kind of stuff. And, the part of me wants to, yell out like, I
Yeah.
need this, like, it's
Yeah.
for my eyes. And part of me just stayed quiet, and I dealt with it. But yeah, that was how it went.
You just show them on the field.
Exactly. And I did. And I'm proud of how I showed up that way.
That's awesome. So Bucknell, how did you find them? How did they find you? And what, walking on at that level is not easy, man.
Mhm.
I played at Maine, and I remember the guys who walked on. I was fortunate to get a scholarship to play. And the guys that walked on, those guys have the biggest hearts in the world. I'm telling you, the biggest hearts in the world. So talk about that. You get out of high school, you go to, it's not like I don't like to poo-poo the Division 3 level of sports because that's a little bit easier. But you went to Bucknell. That's big time football. You know, talk about that experience and the motivational factor to go up there.
Sure. So I pursued Bucknell purely for academics, and I had some friends who had went there a few years older than I was, and they had great experiences. And so I wanted to study molecular biology because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I was good at science and math. And once I got up there, I realized that something was just missing. I met new people, I had new experiences, but it just wasn't the same. I had nothing that was holding my life together the way that football felt like it used to. Football was almost the glue to my life. It tied
Mm.
together the social and in some ways the academics and just my overall fitness and mindset. And football was somehow at the center of it. And so without that, I felt like something was missing, and I realized it was football. So I reached out to my high school coach, Coach Gisarno, probably the best coach I've ever had, and he walked me through the steps. He said, we'll put together, a video. My dad helped me with that. And he said, I'll write a letter to the coach. You go talk to him, whatever kind of tryout there is, you go do that tryout, you give your best effort. And that's what I did. And Coach Joe Susan, who is now part of the Rutgers coaching
Yep.
staff, was the head coach at Bucknell. And I remember sitting in his office telling him who I was and why I wanted to join the team, and he told me to come to the 5 a.m. Conditioning practice that they were having. And so I came, had no idea what to expect. I just went through everything as if I was part of the team. And then at the end, he brought me up in front of everybody and he said, all right, team, you might have been wondering who this is. This is Joe. And he said, Joe, tell them a little bit about yourself. And so I introduced myself. I was nervous. I'm standing
Yeah.
up in front of these, to me, looked like grown men.
Oh yeah.
And so I introduced myself and he said, and tell them about your GPA. And, at the time, I think I had a 3.8 GPA. And he knew
Impressive.
that just from, thank you, from my transcripts. Um, and I reluctantly said that because he wanted me to share that with the team. And so the team started calling me 3.8. That was my nickname. And he said, Joe is part of the team. Everybody give him a round of applause. And they clapped. And that was it. And he
Wow.
said, now we're going to do conditioning. And if Joe runs under a 5 second 40-yard dash, no conditioning for the team. If he doesn't, double conditioning today.
Oh,
Yeah. I ran a 5.1.
no way.
Yeah. So, but that
Uh,
was, that was the start of it. And I had a great experience, met some amazing people. And honestly, I learned a lot of really, really great life lessons from the short period of time that I was on the team.
did they change your name from 3.8 to 5.1?
They should have, but no, that would have been hilarious.
That would have been a good one, right?
Yeah.
So how did playing college sports, college football, really help you in your personal growth?
This one's easy. And there's one lesson that stands out to me the most. So in high school, we watched film. We'd watch the other team, we'd watch our previous game, we'd pick that apart and dissect it. But that was about it. In college at Bucknell, we would watch every single practice. So we have practice on Tuesday, we would watch Monday's practice before. And if you made a mistake, you knew you were going to get called out for it. And, if you went the wrong direction, if you walked instead of jogged, whatever it was, you were going to be held accountable for that. It was a very intense process in a way that I wasn't used to.
Yep.
And so, went through that for about a year. And when my time playing football ended, I realized that I missed it. I realized that watching film, while it was very uncomfortable at times, and I didn't always love it, it made me a better football player. It made me a better teammate. And I think more importantly, it made me a better person because I knew when I was out on the field, somebody was watching. And so when I was between the white lines, I would sprint. If I was supposed to be somewhere, I would go there with intention. If I made a mistake, I would at least make it fast. And I played a whole different game than I've ever played before because I knew people were watching. So I took that into my life outside of football and thought, well, what would it look like to play my life as if it were be on film? What would I do today if I knew someone was going to sit down and review the film with me?
Right.
And I started to make better decisions, and I started to act with more intention, and I started to hustle more and work harder. And I think on a subconscious level, I've carried that with me to this point in my life and will always carry that with me. But that was hands down the biggest thing I took away from the sport of football is that if you live your life as if someone else is going to watch it, you play a different game. And I like the way I play that game.
So, unfortunately, you only played 1 year,
Mm.
right? What's your most memorable moment in that 1 year?
So I never saw the field during a full regular season game. I walked on. I was a smaller guy. I was the how do I put this? I was the support and energy and encouragement on the sidelines and the guy who
Need
hustled
it.
really hard.
You
Yeah,
need it.
yeah, and I felt part of the team. But my most memorable moment was actually the tackle I made in a spring ball practice. That I got up from and realized that that's not good because I can't see the way I was able to see before I made that hit. It was a weekday practice. It was dark outside. Lights were on. We were in uppers, so shoulder pads and helmets. And I made a hit on a guy coming across the middle to catch a ball, and I put a pretty good hit on him. But when I got up, like I said, I realized that I had lost some of my sight. And I'll never forget going over to Coach Susan and telling him what had happened. And he was aware of my condition. And he sent me off the field to the trainer, and we went in the locker room, took off my pads, and I've never, ever put on shoulder pads or helmet since then. And so I'll just never forget that moment.
Well, you know, I don't know if you had this issue, but many of the athletes that I talk to, um, when that last day comes, because you don't know when it's like you had no plan on that was your last day. You woke up in the morning like, hey, I'm gonna keep going, no problem, and you had no thoughts about that. But when that last day comes and you take that helmet off for the last time, or you're told you can't put it back on, how did you mentally handle that?
I'm gonna be honest. It was two different feelings. One feeling was devastated, and it was a mix of devastation, sadness, disbelief, confusion, overwhelm. Because, like you said, right, like you don't expect that, and even if you do expect it, it's hard to process because it means the end of a chapter of your life.
Right.
Especially with a sport like football, where I don't know any adults, maybe there are some out there who play tackle football when they're 30, 40, 50. It just, we're not built for that.
No.
So that was one side. But to be honest, the other side that I don't talk about is relieved. I think part of me
Mm.
felt relieved because of how hard college football was. And it was a grind, not only from a physical sense, but from a time commitment standpoint, from a mental and emotional standpoint. It's a lot of work. You're thinking really hard all the time about the defenses you're running, the other team's offense, what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing, where you need to be, what time the meeting is. It was a lot to handle. And so there was a small part of me that felt a sense of relief knowing that I didn't have to do all that
Right.
again. But the larger part was the devastation.
Yeah. Now, when did you start playing? How old were you?
I would have been around second or third grade. So let's say 10.
So
And
nine,
then,
10. Yeah.
yeah. So I was playing football for about a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's over. I think the hardest part is really not when the helmet comes off. It's the following summer, the following August when it's time to go to camp. And well, guess what? You're not going anymore. That's it. And then you see some of the guys you played with, they're all going, and then you watch on TV and then you're like, man, that's when I felt I'll use your word, the devastation of, man, this isn't happening anymore, you know?
I'll say this. I have trouble watching football. Not because I don't enjoy it or that I can't appreciate it, but that there's just such a big part of me that wants to play. And it's almost it's almost a bit frustrating to watch because part of me just wants to be out there.
Yeah.
Uh, and so yes, and when it really hit me, I would say is when life settled back down and I was actually still in class before the school year ended. It was late spring. And yeah, all the people I had just created relationships with were at practice, and I was in the library by myself. And this season of life also coincided with me deciding that I didn't want alcohol to be part of my life, which is a weird thing as an 18, 19-year old to say I'm going to stop drinking
And a football
because
player.
and a football player, because you shouldn't be drinking when you're 18, 19. But that was also the last time I ever drank.
Wow.
And
Good for
so,
you.
yeah, I appreciate it. I have a very extreme personality. And so I realized that that extreme of my life I didn't want anymore. And so I've channeled that into other things now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you miss the most about, let's say, football?
I'm a very kind, gentle person. And I mean that. And I don't know if anybody will ever understand this unless you played football, but there's something about the physical. You could just tackle somebody, right?
Yeah.
It felt good to be able to hit people,
Yeah.
and I miss having a place to express myself that way.
Hmm. It's so many guys say that they just miss the physicality of, running, hitting, and the exuberance of it.
Mm,
And again, I talk to a lot of guys, and it's just so hard to explain. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And when you get some guys that have played before around the table, and you're just kind of kibitzing a little bit, all that always comes out. You
yeah.
know, which is
I
cool.
I went back and visited my high school a couple of times during their summer practices,
Yep.
just because I like to stay in touch with that program and
Yeah.
it's fun to go back. But walking through the locker room, that smell of
Oh
like
yeah.
like it's disgusting, but also nostalgic at the same
Yep.
time. And that brings back a lot of memories for me.
The smell of the locker room. How about, well, you young guys, I mean, you guys are super compared to me, super. Like there was no turf fields when I was playing. If you were lucky that one school had AstroTurf, the stuff that killed you when you got tackled on it. But what hits me is the smell of the grass.
Mm,
Even when you
yeah,
fresh cut grass, I'm like right back out there. I'm like, holy smokes,
yeah, yeah.
the crazy things like that, right? All right, so let's talk about, hey, you graduate from school. Now you want to get your doctorate. What inspired you to do that?
So part of my story is at Bucknell, I was a molecular biology major. And after my sophomore year, when football was no longer a part of my life, and I had given up drinking, and I felt like I was in flux. I didn't really feel like I had a place socially. I was going through a tough time, and I really reassessed what I wanted. And it wasn't to be in medicine the way I thought maybe at one point I wanted to. It wasn't to be in a research lab. And I realized that I wanted to help people and I wanted to do that through movement. And so I put two and two together and decided physical therapy would be a great route to pursue. Unfortunately, Bucknell didn't really have much in the way of exercise science or anatomy. And so I transferred to Rutgers University, where I got my bachelor's of science in kinesiology and exercise science.
Okay.
And then from there, I knew I wanted to pursue graduate school. So I interviewed for physical therapy programs, ended up choosing between University of Delaware and Drexel University. I just felt better at Drexel. It felt like more of a right fit. And so decided to go there and started that program in the spring. No, sorry, the fall of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how many years was that?
So that program was about 3 years.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
Yeah.
So where does that put you now as far as professionally?
So I graduated from Drexel in 2019. And then, so I've been out of school, out of grad school for a little over 5 years. And for the first 2 years, I practiced in an outpatient clinic here in Philadelphia. I treated just the general population, got to see some athletes, really enjoyed that work, but felt very boxed in the way that I was required to practice and interact with people because of essentially how the insurance model works. And so at that time, I had also been working with clients in the fitness space, both in person and online. And I decided I wanted to do more of that. So I continued to grow this thing on the side until the summer of 2021 when it felt big enough for me to take that leap, start my own business officially called Project Durr. And I quit my job and I've been doing this for the past 3 or so years and have really been loving it.
That is so cool. You know, I was listening to your videos and I tried to write down as much as I can to kind of come up with these questions. But you mentioned in there, you talked about like titles don't define you,
Mm.
right? You know, how do you stay grounded? You know, I mean, how many titles can you have? You know, I mean, you could probably make this laundry list of all the things that you have, but how do you stay grounded without the title?
Well, I think for me, I've just realized through the struggles I've gone through related to my eyes that anything could be taken away from you at any time. And so, with that being said, that doctorate title, that can be stripped of you. That could be meaningless at some point. That title of football player, right? I'm no longer that. And at one point in my life, I had attached myself so strongly to it. All these titles, they are just that. They are titles, they're descriptors. And so I think the way I've reframed it for myself and a way to stay grounded is I have characteristics that make up who I am as a human. And I choose to channel those characteristics into certain things. So, for example, I told you before we recorded, or maybe it was on the recording, I've run every day for the past 912 days. I would call myself a runner. However, if the day ever came when I couldn't run for whatever reason, I would channel the characteristics that I currently put into running into other things. I'm a competitor, I'm driven, I like a challenge. Those things can be funneled anywhere. They don't have
Yep.
to be funneled into running and me slap a label on it. So I like to think of who I am as a human, and I have these characteristics, and I can choose to put those in any place that I'd like.
Hence Project Endure.
Mm.
Right. So talk about that. What inspired that? You know, how did that, what were the stepping stones to that and how did it just take off?
Sure. So I'll go back into graduate school for just a second. When I was entering graduate school, I had just lost a significant portion of my sight. So at this point in my life, again, legally blind in my right eye, recent change in the way that I see the world. And I was just going through a tough time. I was in a new place. I was starting a doctorate program. I didn't know anyone here in Philadelphia. And so that tough, dark, hard season of my life ended up leading me to the woman who's now my wife. Her name's Michaela. She's the most amazing person I've ever met. She's my best friend, and I owe a lot to her. And I share all this because that dark season of my life led me to the best thing. And there's this quote that I love. It's from Christine Kane, who said, "Sometimes when you're in a dark place, You think you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. And that is really important because it's stuck with me to the point where I have it tattooed on me. I think about it often, and I truly believe everything happens for a reason. I also believe that there is no strength without struggle. And so if you think of, you walk into a weight room, right? The only way you get stronger is if you pick up some weights and you push against some resistance and you struggle. And I think that life has two kinds of hard: the kind of hard that we choose, and then also the kind of hard that chooses us. And
Mm.
I think that both kinds of hard are incredible stimuli for strength and growth. And so Project Endure exists because of all of those life experiences and those insights, and me wanting other people to realize that whether they are choosing to pursue something hard or something hard has chosen them, they can still choose their perspective and choose growth through whatever it is they're going through. And I don't want people to feel alone in that. I want people to feel supported and seen and encouraged. And at its core, that's really what Project Endure is all about.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
The hard that chooses us, or we choose the hard. Can you just go into that a little bit more? There's some people might be saying, well, how do I figure that out?
Mm. So I host a podcast and I share that because I ask every guest two of the same questions. One is, what is the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose? And the other is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not choose for yourself? And what's really interesting to me is that over the course of 170 plus episodes, every single time, almost without fail, the hard thing that someone has had to handle that they did not choose for themselves has been transformative tenfold compared to the hardest thing that they've ever chosen for themselves. And so when I think of the difference, I think of, did you choose to run a marathon? Did you choose to put yourself in a certain position? Did you choose this challenge? If yes, then you chose the hard. Or did you lose a loved one? Did you lose a job? Were you diagnosed with a condition that you have no control over, like the case with my eyes? And that's the kind of hard that chooses us. And in my view and my experience, that kind of hard is so transformative when you choose the right perspective, because you have no choice. You can't quit that kind of hard. I can't just snap my fingers or get to a finish line or throw my hands up and say, okay, I've had enough. This is with me forever. And because of that, I feel like I've been forced to adapt and grow and change. And, I used to see going blind as such a burden, but I now see it as such a blessing because of exactly that.
That's amazing how you turn that into a positive versus there's so many people, Joe, that might be just sitting home and saying, why me? Right? How come I got dealt with these cards? Why do I have to deal with this?
Mm.
And you take it as like it's almost like this is not what you're saying, but it's almost like you chose it because it made you who you are. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I would not change it if I had the choice, and I guess in a way I have chose it, even though it did choose me. And, that question, why me, that's gone through my mind thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important to orient everyone listening to the conversation, because I'm 30. I feel this way right now. But I was diagnosed with this condition when I was 10, and I
Yeah.
did not feel this way for the large majority of that time span. And so one of the things that I'm really big on when I talk to people who are going through hard things or who want to make a change but have trouble changing their perspective is that it takes time. It would be ridiculous if I went outside after recording this podcast and I planted a seed in the ground for a tomato plant, and I went back outside tomorrow and was frustrated because it hadn't become a full grown tomato plant.
Mm.
That's not how they work, right? You plant a seed and you have to nurture it and you have to be patient, and it needs the right soil and it needs time. And I think when we have ideas planted in our mind, or we try to make a change, or we want to shift our perspective, we can get so frustrated with ourselves. Like, why is this not happening already?
Right.
But I think there's a process and it takes time. So I just want to say that for anyone listening who feels like they haven't been able to make a mindset shift, I think it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. And everybody's different.
True.
right? And how they process that time. You know, some people are a little more patient than others, and obviously some are impatient. Um, but you know, I love what you said about it's like planting the seed, you know, and it just takes time. You gotta grow, you gotta water it, you gotta, you know, the right soil, you gotta nurture it, and you gotta wait, you know, and that is awesome. You know, so you know, you're a spiritual guy. Talk about that. Talk about how that's helped shape you, you know, from you know maybe when you were a younger guy and maybe thinking about the why me to today where everything is so positive. Not that you don't face some struggles and some tough days like we all do, but talk about the spiritual side of things and how that's impacted you.
Sure. And I appreciate that question because it is a big part of who I am. And so I grew up again in Westfield, New Jersey, going to church on Sundays. And I was introduced to the concept of faith through that experience. And I always knew for me that there was something bigger. I always believed in God. And, you know, through my childhood, you do what you do as a kid. You go to church because you have to and, you know, whatever. But when I was a teenager, I became more serious about it. And, you know, I felt like I was getting closer in that relationship to God. I was growing in my faith. And then fast forward to college, you kind of fall away a little bit. You get carried away with, you know, school, a new environment, new people. And then when I started graduate school and I went through that really hard year, that first year of graduate school, um, I woke up every morning and I couldn't put a smile on my face. You know, I felt down. No matter what I tried or how hard I worked, I felt like I couldn't feel better. And that led me to a place where I felt very distant in my faith. I felt, you know, if there was a God and he cared about me, well, how could he let me feel like this? And I think that's important because once I started spending time with that girl I mentioned, the girl who's now my wife, she invited me to church and I went because I wanted to spend time with her. And I remember standing in church with her and having just this wave of emotion wash over me. And it was almost as if I felt God tell me, you know, I know you stopped chasing me, but I never stopped chasing you. And it was where everything changed. And I realized that, you know, faith was more important to me than ever before. And I needed it in my life. And, you know, the overarching concept of faith for me is that it's not about me. And even though I can't see everything that's happening and I can't, you know, I can't predict or connect the dots going forward, there's a trust. And that trust is a skill and it's a practice and it's something that I choose, but there's a trust that everything will work out for the way that it's supposed to. And that takes so much weight and pressure off of me and has been just so pivotal in my perspective on life.
That's so cool. You know, in your videos, you talk about inspiring others. It's like your mission,
Hmm.
right? How does that translate your day to day?
Hmm. That's a great question. Um, well, I'll start with this. One of the ways that my perspective was shaped from, I'd say, my teenage years onward was through content. It was through videos. It was through podcasts. It was through things I was consuming, books, articles, etc. And so I always knew that I had been inspired by other people. And it led me to want to inspire other people who might be going through hard things. And sometimes I can get carried away with that on the macro scale, you know, putting out a podcast and hoping a lot of people listen, or creating a piece of content and hoping a lot of people see it, or growing a business and hoping to reach and impact a lot of people. But the truth is, I think the most important avenue that I have or anyone else has for inspiration is up close and personal. You know, there's a Paul Shane Spear quote that I love, and he said, "You might not be able to change the world, but you can always change the world for one person." And
Mhm.
so that daily inspiration sometimes can slip past me as I think about the bigger picture and expanding and growing and reaching more people. But the truth is, that's the most important form of inspiration. And I think the way that I try to bring that into my daily life is just by giving people my undivided attention and truly caring and being there and supporting others. And even just answering this question is a great reminder that I can still do a better job of that.
It's crazy. I mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, it's Well, you think about your mindset, right? How do you keep that mindset so optimistically positive when you've dealt with have been dealt a fate that you didn't choose?
Mm. I just don't like the alternative, if I'm being honest. I think one of the only things, and I guess if you boil it down to this one thing, the only thing that we can control is the choices we make. And we can choose our actions, we can choose our attitude, we can choose our perspective, but it's really all about choices. And I don't think that life is really about what happens to us. I think it's about how we choose to respond. And that's so central in how I view the world. It's so true in my mind that everything that happens to me, around me, etc., I have a choice. I have power, I have control. And with that, I just don't like the alternative, because the alternative to choosing the perspective that I have is essentially to throw up my hands and play victim. The alternative is to throw in the towel and not try. And I just don't like that. I think there's something in me, maybe it's my conscience or just a sense of guilt that just doesn't like that. And so I don't think I could ever choose that.
Well, that leads me to this next question, which is again, I wrote these things down after listening to your videos. I'm like, I got to ask Joe this stuff. You talked about being grateful. You said it tonight and you said it in your videos, be almost grateful for going blind, and there's so many people out there that I'm saying, what? How could anybody be grateful for that? And for those who can't see Joe right now, when I said that, his face lights up, big smile on his face with exuberance, and talk about that and talk about how that perspective has changed your life.
Yeah. I mean, to just start here, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I wasn't losing my sight, if I didn't have this struggle that was gifted to me. So there's one, right? I've made so many amazing connections. I've met so many great people because I've chosen to go down this path because of what I'm struggling with. I also think it's just taught me so much about life and so much about myself in such an accelerated way. I feel on the inside, I feel like I'm 60 years old. I don't know. You could,
60.
yeah. What does it feel like to
Trust
be?
me, you don't feel like you're 60. I'll tell you right now.
Well, I feel older than I am, and I think a lot of that is because I've had to grow up. I've had to think about hard things. I've been forced to have hard conversations and make tough decisions, and that's helped me grow up a bit more quickly than I would have otherwise. And then also, the truth is the nature of this condition is uncertain. It's unpredictable. I could live another decade without a single change in my sight, or I could wake up tomorrow, roll over in bed, and not be able to see my wife's face or drive a car or read a book. And that's the truth. And that is scary, and that fear, I think, overwhelmed me when I was younger, because of all the what ifs that pop into your head when you think of that scenario. But it's also helped me be so grateful for every single day. And when I wake up and I open my eyes and I could still drive a car or read a book or do the things I want to do, it's an amazing day. There's a sense of I get to do this. I don't have to do this. And all of those reasons and more are why I'm grateful for this condition, because otherwise I think I would be a bit arrogant and maybe a bit ignorant. And I don't think I would be the person I am today. And I like the person I am today.
No, I got to ask this question. And I feel kind of weird asking it, right? But when you go to bed at night, do you worry about the next morning?
Mm. When I was in middle school and high school, if I'm being honest, I checked under my bed for monsters. Unrelated to your question, but you know, ever since then, I don't think I have. I do know it's a reality. I do know it's a possibility, but I am so amazed at the human body and the human mind where this is my normal, right? So like, yes, if you put someone else in my shoes and they looked through my eyes, they would be thrown off and, disoriented and potentially overwhelmed. But this is my normal and I've adapted to that. And so even though I live with this condition and the reality of it, every day that I operate and every night I go to bed is just my normal. And so I don't think about that too often.
Okay. So you talked about before about doing your best in the moment,
Mhm.
right? And you said that also. It's fun. It's almost like I'm watching the videos because you're saying, similar stuff, which is great, you know. But how do you stay focused every day, with this path of uncertainty? How do you just stay so focused and tuned in to what you're doing?
So I haven't put this together until this moment, actually. So this thought is evolving, but I actually don't think that time is my most valuable resource, right? I think a lot of people would say time is the most precious thing we have because we can never get it back. But I actually think it's focused time. It's attention. It's where you place your attention within the time that you have. And so I'm very meticulous with my time and my calendar and my attention. And because I feel like, in a week, a month, a year, I might not be able to operate the way I operate because of my eyes. I want to make the most of the time that I have. And so if anybody looked at my schedule, it is time blocked to the minute. I have the things that I want to do, I have the things that I need to do. I make time for what's important, and it's all in my calendar. And I'm so proud of the fact that if you looked at my calendar and you looked at how the time is allotted, it would line up very well most times with the person that I'm trying to become. You could see the time in there for reading, for journaling. I have time with my wife scheduled into my calendar. And I know that might sound crazy to some people, but the truth is, if I get to the end of a workday as an entrepreneur, my temptation is to continue working. So I glance over at my calendar, and that's the end of the day. And now the next time block is time to unwind and be present with my wife. So I feel that time is so precious. My attention is really what's more precious within that time. And so I feel like it's my responsibility to use it well. And that really helps me dial in the focus.
Man, you said something that is so true. I mean, a lot of stuff you say is so true, but you just said as an entrepreneur, you can lose track, you know? And listen, I live that every day, and I live on what I call goal time versus clock time.
Mm,
I have all these goals for the day. Hey, this is what I gotta get done. This is what I gotta get done. And I have it mapped out for the week, for the month, for the period, for the quarter, which is what we call a period. It's all mapped out. And like I don't look at the clock.
mm,
But when I'm done, I'm done. I'm like, oh, okay. I can get home early today. You know what I mean? But how do you handle that? You
mm.
know, uh, the struggle. It's a struggle to stay on that track with that calendar, because especially if you're in a business, right? And you got to make what? You got to pay the bills.
Mhm.
So how do you balance that? Between your personal, like you said, your wife. She's a huge part of your life. You got your faith, you got your business, you got your physicality. How do you stay in or in balance? And if you're out of balance, what do you do to get back?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've said this before on other podcasts that I've been a guest on, but I actually don't love the idea of balance. I mean, I do love the idea of balance because
There
it's
is there
it's
is no balance.
exactly right. It's a nice idea, but I think it's more for me about managing seasons of imbalance and knowing that I only have so much time in any given day, I only have so much energy and attention. And so the first thing that I do every single morning when I wake up is I journal. It's been a practice that's been really helpful for me to understand how I'm feeling, to almost give myself a pep talk before the day starts, and just process things. So I do that first thing, drink some coffee, drink some water, and then I work out. My fitness and my physicality is so important to me.
It's
Um,
intense what you do.
yeah, some would describe it that way.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I get up usually around 3:30 or 4 in the morning and do this stuff. And I do it because nobody's texting me, nobody's calling me. I have that time to myself. And so I make that time a priority and I do those things. And then the rest of the day for me is work. And I also would like to think I work on goal time, although a lot of what I do involves meeting with other people. And so part of it is dependent on when the calls are scheduled and when the sessions are scheduled. And then when I get to the end of the day, like I said, it's time with my wife. But the truth is, there are weeks where I have to sit down with her and say ahead of time, like, hey, this is a crazy week. I have this thing that's scheduled until 8, or I have this one day where I might need to be out until 9. Is that okay with you? And we map that out together. And I'm so grateful for someone who's understanding of that and communicates well with me. And we're a team in that way. And so I also realized, and this is a fear of mine, that someday we would love to start a family, and I'm not going to have as much time to dedicate to the things that I want to dedicate. And those, 6 day a week, 2 hour workouts will probably need to be dwindled down and changed up and adapted a bit to the schedule. And I understand that that season is in the future. And so I'm trying to make the most of this season of imbalance where I work quite a bit.
Well, here's what I can tell you, Joe. As you age,
Mhm.
your body will start to tell you, hey, slow down, young man. You just can't do those things. Your mind says, let's go. Your body
Mhm.
says, no go,
Mm.
you know. But, balance, I talk about that a lot in the world, the profession that I'm in. And I believe, Joe, there really is no balance. You're out of balance in one way at that time, and you're there. So maybe it's working out. You're out of balance there. Your feet are on the ground. You're focused. You're there. You're out of balance with your wife. You're totally focused. Your feet are on the ground there. You're out of balance at work. There is no balance. Like sometimes you got to give more to one than the other just because that's the way the life goes,
Yeah.
right? So that is so cool. So your vision,
Mhm.
right? It's who you are. It's your life, right? When you look at that, how has that helped you? I know we kind of talked about it, but how has that helped you give you new perspective on your life itself as a whole?
Mm. Well, I guess a couple things. One is it's made me way more empathetic to other people. Being in the world of physical therapy and rehab and even fitness, and heck, I guess just being a human and being out there seeing other people, you see people with physical ailments. Someone's using a walker or a cane, or they have a knee brace, or they have a scar or a burn mark or whatever it is. And you can see these physical signs of struggle, of hard things people have been through. If somebody looked at me, they would have no idea that I've been through what I've been through, that I struggle with what I struggle with. And it's just made me realize everyone's going through something. And it's helped me be more patient, again, more empathetic, more understanding, because behind the scenes, behind the facade that we all put up from time to time, you don't know what someone else is going through. So it's helped me be a lot more empathetic. And on top of that, again, I think it's just helped me be more grateful. And so as I go through my days, even when they're hard, I try to remind myself that I get to do things and I don't necessarily have to do things, because it all comes down to a choice and I get to make those choices. And so I'd
Yeah,
say those are the two big ones.
that is so cool. You say in your videos, I don't know which one it was, but you say, you want to be the light. I wrote this down. You want to be the light in other people's darkness.
Mm.
Talk about that, man. I mean, coming from you, a person has a vision issue, like that is so powerful.
Thank you. And I think that just comes from me needing that in previous seasons of my life. And, um, you know, and I try not to, I don't want that to feel like it comes from a place of ego, because it's not. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't care if I'm the light or someone else is the light. I just want there to be lights out there so that other people who feel like they're in the darkness can have a reason to just take one more step to keep going. Because if there's one thing I've learned from the world of running, it's that you'll go out sometimes and you'll feel terrible. And I can relate this maybe more directly to the Rocky steps that we started with. Over 24 hours, you have incredible highs and incredible lows, and you hit points where you don't think you can keep going, or you hit points where you just want to stop. But you remind yourself that if you just keep going, it's 4 a.m., it's 3 a.m., it's 2 a.m., it's dark, it's kind of cold, it's quiet, you're hurting, but you just keep taking steps, one foot in front of the other, and at some point the sun comes up, right? And so if I could give someone else that sense that, okay, the sun is coming up or the light is around the corner, I just need to keep going. I know that in time, just by them continuing to move, they will feel better at some point. And so I've needed that, and I would love to be that for someone else.
It's only pain. It's like, right?
Yeah, it
It's,
stops. Yeah, it
yeah, pain's
stops.
temporary, right?
Hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
temporary. You've heard that before. Pain is temporary. So this is kind of just an extension of that same question. What advice can you give to somebody who's facing struggles, their own adversity? What can you tell them?
Ooh. So I would not have taken this advice when I was younger. It's just, I'll throw that out there because I think sometimes there's really good guidance and even wisdom that some of us hear, and we're just not ready to take it. And I'll say that if my parents are somehow listening to this, they've given me some great advice that I've refused to take because they're my parents. Um, and I didn't want to listen to them. So, with that being said, I would not have listened to this at a younger age. However, I think when you're going through something hard, sometimes it can feel like you don't want to let people in. You know, sometimes it can feel like you're too much of a mess, or it's too uncomfortable, or you don't want people to see you weak, or whatever it is. You don't want to invite people in. But the truth is, and I think of it this way sometimes, is if I moved into a house and I got the furniture all arranged and I put the couch up against the wall and I hung the picture frame and the chairs and the table were there, and all of a sudden something came through and just ripped it all up and flipped over the couch, the picture fell off the wall, the chair was on top of the table, whatever. It might be really hard for me to fix that all by myself. Maybe the couch is too heavy. Maybe I was a little injured. Maybe I just need some help. But I might feel embarrassed to invite someone into my house that seems like it's such a mess. And I think it can feel that way sometimes, like you don't want to bring other people into it. But the truth is, you might need that friend who you open up the door for, ask them to come inside. Hey, you get that end of the couch. I get this end. Let's fix this together. So my point here is, if you're going through something hard, I would say lean on the people that are there for you. And if you
Right.
don't have someone that's there for you, you can find them because there are so many people in this world that care about you.
You just let them in,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know. And Joe, that's a great point to talk about if you don't mind
Mhm.
going down a little road a little bit. For those people that are dealing with whatever they're dealing with, sometimes they just think it's only them. There's nobody else out there has a bigger problem, worse problem, or the same problem. They got the biggest one in the world, and that feeling of loneliness or embarrassment or whatever, it keeps them from asking for help or looking for help. How, can you talk about that a little bit and how people should look at that?
I've got a great story that actually ties back to my time at Bucknell playing football. So when I was there, I met a guy named Danny Gerverts, and Danny was this somewhat quiet kid, but great athlete. You know, everybody loved him. I wanted to be friends with him. And after football practice was over, we'd come back from us, whatever. I'd go back to my dorm. My roommates would go out and party, and I would either sit in my room, go to the library, take a walk, go to the gym, and cry because I didn't drink anymore. I didn't feel like I had any friends, and I felt so alone. And I share all that. It'll be important in a minute. But, the whole story goes, I go to Rutgers, go to Drexel, graduate, marry my wife. We go on our honeymoon, delayed a year because of COVID, but we go on our honeymoon in 2021 to Maui, where Danny is living. Danny is a YouTuber, a filmmaker. He's had such a successful start to his career. It's really amazing. And so I sent him a message and I said, hey, let's meet up. So we met up on the beach, and we're walking on a beach in Maui at this point, 7 or 8 years removed from when we first met each other. And I just said, you really did well at college in football, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be there to see all of it play out. And he just kind of hung his head and he said, yeah, man, I don't know. Like, I kind of hated it. And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't know. Like, outside of like the actual football, I just didn't have any friends. Like, he said this, he said, I'd sit in my room and cry every Friday, Saturday night.
Really?
Yeah. And I got the chills, and I looked at him and I said, me too. And here I was, playing football with this guy, going to class with this guy. I was around this guy, and I put up this wall like everything was fine. And he put up this wall like everything was fine. And deep down, we were going through the exact same thing. And if one of us had just been vulnerable enough to say, I'm not doing great, or when someone said, hey, how's it going? just to give an honest answer and say, yeah, I'm kind of struggling, right?
Yeah.
That could have opened up a door and we could have created a much deeper, longer lasting friendship right from that moment, rather than having to rekindle it, 8 years later on a beach in
Yeah.
Maui. And so I think the point is, you might feel alone. It might feel hard. You might not imagine anyone else can relate. But the truth is, there are people that you are living with, working with, going to school with, at the gym with. There are people all around you who are going through things very, very similar, if not the same to you, and nobody's talking about it. And so, if you have the courage to start that conversation, I think you would be surprised at how many people could relate to that.
That is so cool. Now, are you still tight with this guy now?
I am. Yeah, Danny's a good friend.
Is he still in Maui?
No, he moved back to Pennsylvania. He
Why?
actually, well, he really he dove into the filmmaking scene. He created a film, and I believe so. It's on Amazon Prime. He's going to be big time. So I'm grateful to know him. But he wanted to take his career to the next level and needed to do that here.
That is cool.
Yeah,
But Maui, oh, it's
yeah,
kind of hard to give
beautiful.
that beach up, right?
Oh man, so beautiful.
Oh my God. So let's talk about success for you. Okay. Um, you talk about, again, I'm looking here at my notes about making a positive impact on other people's lives. Well, how do you do, I know before you talk, hey, if you can just impact one person, but how does that look like for success look like for you with impacting other people's lives? You can describe that.
Sure. So I'll go on two separate paths here. One is more visual. So I watched this documentary about police dogs and how they sniff out, drugs or people or whatever they're looking for. And at one point in this film, there's an aerial view of a forest, and they let a dog out of the car, and there are drugs maybe 100 yards in front of the dog. But the dog doesn't run straight to the drugs. The dog runs to the left, and then it runs to the right, and it zigzags back and forth as it moves slowly forward toward what it's looking for. And as it sweeps left and right, as it gets closer, those sweeps become more narrow until eventually it hones in this big triangle shape to what it's looking for. And I share that because when I started this business, people would ask me, what does success look like? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And my honest answer that I was too afraid to say at the time is like, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah.
it looks like. I couldn't give you details.
Yep.
I don't know. Ask me in 5 years. I'll tell you what it looks like. But um, I say that because I've been chasing this feeling. I've been sniffing out, right? Just like those dogs sniff out. I've been sniffing
Yeah.
out this thing that I can't see. I can't see it. I can't detail it. I could barely describe it. I just could feel it. And the closest I've gotten to that feeling is at our annual event that we throw. It's a Project Endure event. It happens each spring. We've done 3 of them. And this year in April, standing in front of 250 attendees, giving a speech, and just standing there looking at a lot of these people I knew from different walks of life, clients, friends, acquaintances, and a lot of people I didn't know, who all gave up their valuable time on a weekend to, embrace growth and do hard things together as a group under the umbrella of what I have built. Standing there in that moment, that was the closest I've ever gotten to the feeling of what I want. Because through that day, I watch people push themselves, and I watch people connect with each other, make new friends, and find support and be able to give support. It was so special. So that's one side of it. And then the other side of it is actually tied to my biggest fear. And I think my biggest fear in life is spending so much of my time, energy, and attention on what I think is important, impacting a lot of people, building a big business, doing these extreme things. My biggest fear is that I would get to a point someday where I realized that I actually neglected the things that were the most important to me, being the people closest to me, my
Mm.
wife, my family, my friends. And so I think success more than anything else looks like being a great husband and a great son and a great brother, and hopefully someday a great dad, and just being there for those people first and foremost, because I have a tendency to get carried away. And so success first and foremost is like that core unit of people for me.
That's awesome. But you missed out on one thing. You said husband, son, brother, dad. What are you missing?
Dog dad?
Grandfather. You can be a grandfather one day too.
Someday. Yes. Long time away from now.
I don't want to wish your life away, but God willing, that day is going to come. So So people might be wondering, Joe, like, what does this guy do for a living? What is his job? What does he do? Let's talk about what you do.
Sure. So, in a very, very simple sense, I'm a coach. And so, what that looks like is really three pronged. So, I coach in the realm of fitness. So, I help people reach their fitness goals, run a marathon, gain muscle, lose fat, feel more confident with movement. So, I coach in that realm. I do what I call as mindset coaching, where I help people navigate various life struggles, reframe their perspective, work through challenges, and have a teammate to go through those seasons of life. And then I also do what I call business coaching, and I use that term loosely. My only experience in this world is being mentored myself and then starting this business and running it for the past 3 or so years. And so a lot of that actually looks like working with people who are on a very similar path, but just haven't started yet, and being able to give guidance, answer questions, and give support. So it's those three prongs. But to me, being a coach is just being a really great friend and adding extra specific guidance and accountability and support and pushing people and challenging them to be the best that they can be. And honestly, a big part of my job is believing in people. And I love that.
How long have you been doing this now?
So I started quote unquote performance coaching. So I was working in a facility that worked with high school and college athletes back in 2014. So that would be 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I started the mindset slash business side of this about 5 years ago. And then everything became formalized 3 years ago.
So can you just break down the mindset part of it? Because
Yeah.
some people look at that as like, is it real? Do I really need to do that? The fitness I get because you can see the fitness. So many people, they spend 90, 95% working on their body, their fitness, but nothing up here.
Yeah.
Talk about the value of that and how that works.
If I'm being completely honest, I think the biggest value is challenging people to sit with the things that they don't want to sit with. I'll give an example. I have a client who works so hard. They work so hard. They push themselves physically, self improvement, all of that stuff, and they share so much of it with the world, to the extreme where every single repetition of every single thing they do is out there on the internet, and they're constantly seeking validation. And they came to me because they just felt empty, a lack of fulfillment, like something was off. And through conversation and some challenging questions, some journal prompts and exercises, we kind of got to this place where they realized, hey, my parents and nobody in my life ever validated me. And I feel like I want that and need that from people. And so they crave external validation. And so one of the things I've challenged them to do, for example, is to do the work in silence, is to do the work without posting, to do the work without searching and seeking for that validation, and see how it makes them feel. And then we have conversations on that. And it's really led to some fruitful discussion and some really cool insights, but it's challenging people to sit with the things that they wouldn't normally sit with, or entertain the thoughts or questions they would normally just avoid. Because I think a lot of the times what we want is on the other side of hard. And so it's helping walk people to that other side of hard.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
You challenge people to sit with the things they don't want to sit with. That is
Mhm.
so cool. So I have to ask you this question though. And you said before, you said, I don't know. Let's forget about 5 years from now. What's your aspiration for 2025?
Mm. So aspiration for 2025 is to start a family.
Okay.
And I understand that not all of that is within, my control and my wife's control, and we'll see what happens. But first and foremost, I would love to be a dad by the end of 2025. So I'm looking forward to that. I would love to continue growing the business. And part of that means bringing other people into the fold who have responsibilities. Right now, we have three other individuals who coach clients under the umbrella of Project Endure. And I would love to not only add on to that, but maybe more importantly, pour into those people even further, help them develop, support them, and help them grow. So that would be another goal. And then I think from a physical standpoint in 2025, I would simply love to just continue my run streak and, continue that daily run streak indefinitely beyond 2025 as well.
How many days are you on now?
Today is day 912, and day 1000 will be January 2nd of 2025.
Now, where do you keep track of that?
Yeah, so there, I use an app called Strava, and so
Yep,
that tracks my run, and that's where it's kept.
I'm on there.
And
I'm going to look you up.
oh yeah, well, you will not be impressed because every day is mostly just a mile. But honestly, that's the hardest part is just not only remembering, but getting going and just getting out to run a mile sometimes can be a
Now, don't you
struggle.
have to remember to hit the button?
Yep. Yeah. So I actually forgot that a few days, and I could have just said that I did it, but I had to go back
Went
and
out and ran
actually
another mile.
yeah. My favorite mile though, two favorite miles real quick. I had a 101-degree fever on day 365. That was a fun mile.
Oof.
And then I got stuck in the Philadelphia airport, and I thought I was going to be there through midnight. So I ran a mile in the Philadelphia airport.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That must have
I'm
been pretty cool.
I'm nuts. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Joe, I wouldn't say you're nuts. I'm going to use your line. Is that what you said before? Is you're planted.
Mm.
You are so planted. It's incredible, and God bless you for all the things that you're doing and have done, and your attitude is infectious,
Oh.
and for all those, I mean, let them know what your website real quick.
Sure. So my website, my personal website is joerinaldi.blog. And if you go there, you can learn all about me. And I would love to also connect with anyone who wants to talk. I feel like that's been a huge part of my journey is being able to converse with people who have been through interesting things and have unique perspectives. So I'm always open to that.
That's great. Well, Joe, we've talked for a lot of time here, and I've asked you a ton of questions. I appreciate your openness and you're willing to share your journey. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet that you think we should talk about before we wrap it up?
So I told you beforehand there was a quote that I would love to share, and I would love to share that quote.
Sure.
I also have a second, so I'm going to share two quotes, and if you want to talk about either, I'm more than happy. But the one is from an unknown author, and it goes like this: "A toothless life. I have never bitten into anything. I was waiting. I was reserving myself for later on, and I have just noticed that all my teeth have gone." And that one stands out to me because, we don't know when our time is up. We don't know when the opportunities will pass. All we have is right now. And I think that if there's something that anyone out there feels called to do, we should bias toward action. We should take that bite and we should do it while we have teeth.
Hmm.
So that's one. And then the second quote, which is one of my all-time favorites from Friedrich Nietzsche, is those who dance are considered insane by those who can't hear the music. And I think that for a lot of my life, I've danced to this music that's been in my head. And I've worried about what other people would think, stopping drinking when I was a teenager, going to bed early, waking up early, working out hard. And I've been so blessed to find so many other people who are dancing to that same music. And that to me is what Project Endure is all about, is a bunch of crazies dancing to our own music. And it's a lot of fun.
It's so funny you say that. I mean, funny, like I'm laughing. My brother's daughter got married last year, and they had this thing at the reception where everybody wore headphones, and you can hit the button and play different styles of music,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody, the whole room had them. Everybody's dancing, but people were singing too. But when you had the headphones on, you couldn't hear anything but the music. So when you switched the music, their dance styles seemed kind of funny. And then when you took it off and you listen to them, they're listening to this music and they're singing and they sound horrible, but they're all, yeah, everybody puts them on and they're smiling, having a great time. It was really incredible, which is, man, that goes right along with the quote
Mm.
you just said, which is awesome.
Yeah, I've never been to a silent disco before, but I would love to have that experience. It sounds
It's pretty
fun.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, even old guys have fun doing that. So Joe, listen, man, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, your night, to be with me and to share your story. I mean, it's incredible, and we're just touching the surface of really what you go through and do and where you were and where you are, where you're going. And I hope people, log into your site, watch your videos, follow you on all the social media stuff because you're all over the place, and it's just exciting to watch, you know, really
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate the kind words and I really appreciate this conversation. It's my bedtime, it's 8 p.m., but I'm so fired up. I might have to wind down a little bit before I
You
hit
might have to go
set.
run another mile, you
I
know.
might have to. I might have to. But in all seriousness, thank you for this and thank you for what you're doing because I think the world needs more conversations like this. So I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
this is great. Well, Joe, thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you running more miles.
Thank you, Jeff.